Shalom, shalom. You're watching Rabbi Simon Altef, and we're today with the Rabbi Jeremiah on my left and Rabbi Yosef on my right.
Shalom.
Shalom.
And our topic today is going to be is an interesting one. And our topic today is what did Jesus say? In other words, what did Yeshua, the Rabbi and the Christian Messiah, has said? We want to examine those words, and we want to look at the text of the New Testament as it is written down, so we can then see it in context, in its culture, in its history, and its environment, and compare it to today's Christianity, asking the imperative questions as to why certain things are and why are not. So I'm gonna, with that in mind, first of all, my question to Rabbi Jeremiah is, I'm going to read a statement, Rabbi Jeremiah, and I'm going to then ask you to answer that. I'm going to take you to Matthew chapter 22, and these verses are going to be, let me open the New Testament, and I'm going to be using the verses 36, I'm going to be using the Hidden Truths of Hebraic Scrolls NT, New Testament, which is, ironically, I'm the person who translated it from the Greek and the Hebrew sources I could find and the Aramaic sources. So my question to you, Rabbi Jeremiah, I mean, you can use the KJV as well as a cross-reference, no problem, is this is what Rabbi Yeshua HaNetzri, the Jesus of Nazareth, said when he was asked, what is the greatest commandment? And it says, then one of them, in verse 35 of Matthew 22, then one of them who was an expert in Torah asked him a question, testing him and saying, Rabbi, which is a great commandment in the Torah? Yeshua said to him, Shema Israel, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, and you shall love Yahweh your power with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and the great commandment. And the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So this is cross-referenced in Mark chapter 12, and we can go over to verses, let's have it over here. In verse 28, and one of the experts of the Torah came, and having heard them reasoning together and perceiving that he had answered them well, asked him, which is the first commandment of all? So here it doesn't answer which is the greatest commandment. It says which is the first commandment of all. And Yehoshua answered him, the first of all the commandments is, Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh our supreme one, Yahweh is Echad, one in unity, in brackets. And you shall love Yahweh your power with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And this is the first commandment. So my question to you, Rabbi Jeremiah, is why, this is from the New Testament, by the way.
Right.
We didn't wrote the we didn't write this down. I mean, I translated it, but I didn't write it down. So why do today's Christianity generally don't adhere to the words of their master and Lord, the person they believe as their savior?
That's a good question. I mean, I personally, if I have to go back, I have to go back to history and say, well, where did it change? I mean, when Yeshua was on the earth,
Right.
from where he was giving these commandments, or saying, Shema Israel is the first commandment,
Right.
what happened between then and now? So we know there has been a lot of Christian forefathers who actually changed the understanding of how the scriptures or the New Testament was read.
Okay.
So therefore they put other things in place and taken the commandments out,
Right.
in a sense.
Right.
So therefore now we have a different understanding of what is Christianity.
So what you're saying, so if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is that according to history and the context at that time and culture,
Yeah.
this commandment's understanding was totally different to the milieu of today, where pastors, preachers, theologians of the past,
Yes.
Christian major theologians, church fathers, as you name it,
Yes.
have twisted the meaning of and changed it altogether.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And what would you say to that particular?
Well, from what I understand, because I used to be in Christianity,
Right.
we were always taught that these laws relate to the Torah, and Christians are not supposed to keep them because Yeshua or Jesus has fulfilled that for us, so we don't need to. So I said to myself, I was talking to a friend yesterday, I said, you pass your test and you drive a car.
Right.
So I want to drive the car and you pass the test for me.
Right.
That doesn't work.
Right.
So I have to pass the test myself and
As
follow
well.
and follow the law.
Right.
So every human being who is in Christianity, who said they are following Christianity, they must adhere to the commandments and follow the law.
In other words, what you're saying is that they cannot depend on Yeshua, Jesus of Nazareth, to fulfilling the command for himself. That doesn't mean by his fulfilling, he's fulfilled it for you and other people.
No. He
Right.
lived the example
Yeah.
to show people how to do it. And then he also says, if you love me, keep my commandments.
Right. So his commandments obviously are all related to what Torah is.
Relates to the Torah, to not only the Ten Commandments, but all the rules and the regulations, the principles of the Torah.
Now, that's an interesting point. You mentioned rules and regulations. So if Christianity doesn't have the rules and regulations of the Torah, where should they go to?
They should go to the Kohen and seek someone who really understands and lives the Torah, because it's a daily way of life. It's not a religion, it's a daily way of life from what I understand and practice now.
Right. So apart from that, the rules and regulations, I mean, we all know that today, I mean, just comparing England,
Yes.
we know that there are several churches here. We know that there are many committed Christians that go to churches week in, week out.
Yes.
They go on the Sunday, in the morning services, evening services, and they do their other celebrations that Christianity's forefathers have established.
Mm-hmm. And
So-
they even have Bible lessons during the week.
Sure, yeah, and Sunday school, etc. But it is never mentioned, from what I understand and seen in the churches, that emphasis is never placed on Jesus' words that he gave. Because, this is one of Jesus' words that he gave.
Yes.
That means that in order to understand what Jesus means, he said this is the first commandment in Mark chapter 12, in Matthew chapter 20 it says this is the greatest commandment. Then that means you have to go to the Torah, the first 5 books, to find out what is it that God desires from you in regards to the basic commandments,
Yeah.
in the first or the greatest. Because from that, so a certain point came in my mind,
Yes.
was regards Islamic theology, where they say the Islamic theology talks about the promised son, but the name is never given.
That's right.
In order to know about that name, you'd have to go back to Moses' writings,
Which is the Torah.
right? Even for Christians to understand what Jesus means, they should surely go back. But nobody ever opens the first 5 books.
No.
That's right.
So how will they ever know?
No, they won't. I have a phrase which people read the Bible with their ears and not with their eyes.
Right.
Ears meaning what pastors and priests and commentaries
Right.
and the numerous books written on the subject. They listen to what people say, but they don't really study. They have it in their hands. They don't really study it. For example, I used to say that when I was in Christianity, I read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, but I haven't moved out of Genesis because there's things in Genesis that I do not understand. So I keep reverting back to it. What does certain things mean?
Right, yeah.
And I think, if they have the book, if you just have the New Testament, well, that's questionable.
Yeah.
But if you have a book and you've got so-called Old Testament and New Testament, then you have to read what is in here because that created this.
Right.
And you cannot have that without that. So they have to refer back to it.
So I think it would be then fair to say that as far as the greatest commandment is concerned, because it says Shema Yisrael,
Yes.
Shema Yisrael Yahweh, in the Hebrew basically I'm speaking.
Yes.
In the English you say,
The Lord God is one.
Right, I can read from the actual. So I'll take it back to the Torah. We'll go
Yes.
to Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 4 because we really should go and look at that because that'll kind of give us a little bit more meat on the product itself. What is it that God is referring to? And I like to take it back there. And Deuteronomy 6:4 it says, "Hear, O Israel, Yud-Heh-Wah-Heh, Yahweh our Supreme One, Yud-Heh-Wah-Heh is Echad. And you shall love Yud-Heh-Wah-Heh, your power, and with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might." Okay. And these words which I command you this day shall be, and then it goes on, in your heart. And then it goes, and you shall teach them diligently to your children. Do Christians teach these words to their children?
No.
That's what God is asking over here.
Yeah. No, they don't.
They don't. Okay. And you shall talk of them when you're in your bed, in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, when you sleep, and when you rise up. Do they talk about them when they sleep and when they rise up
No,
every
they don't.
morning?
No.
No. In fact, they run from it when they hear it.
Okay. So, and then the next one, and you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. Now the Jews, there are different types of Jews. You know, some type of Jews believe that you have to put the box on, you know, the phylacteries. Others don't believe in that, and they believe that you have to internalize it, etc. So basically, you know, God is asking us to internalize the commands,
Yeah.
understand them, you know, practically apply them.
Yeah.
In essence, it says, and it shall be when it says that you shall write them on the posts of your bait house and on your gates. So in other words, you can put a mezuzah up. Well, the actual commandment was 10 commandments.
Yes.
And let's just say people put mezuzah for argument's sake, although it's a 10 commandments. It says, and it shall be when Yahweh your power shall have brought you into the land which he swore to your avowed to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give you great and goodly cities which you did not build, and houses full of good things which you filled not, and wells dug which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant. When you shall have eaten and be full, then beware lest you forget Yudhe which brought you forth out of the land of Mitzrayim from the bait of slavery. So we know that this is speaking to Israel.
Yes.
But we also know that Christians say that they are part of Israel, right?
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken. They don't say we are separated.
No.
We got nothing to do with Israel. Israel is just another nation out there. They say we're part of Israel.
They even think they are the new Israel.
All right. So they believe that the new Israel.
Yes.
So if they're the new Israel, then why aren't they doing these things that Yahweh has commanded
That's a
them?
very good question.
Why aren't they doing them?
It's a very good question. I mean, I think a lot of them actually are happy with just what the preachers are teaching them, and they haven't questioned it themselves. They haven't actually gone back to look and question what actually was Jesus saying.
Well, the God of Israel here is saying, don't forget and teach your children as well.
That's right.
Why are they forgetting?
And that's what Jesus was saying. He was saying,
Yeah.
if you love me,
Right.
obey the commandments.
Yes.
So if Jesus is saying that, is iterating the words of Moses,
Mhm.
he's reiterating the words of Moses, he's amplifying them
Yeah.
as the greatest commandment.
Mhm.
And the Torah doesn't say this is the greatest commandment. Torah just says this is a commandment
Yeah.
that you're to follow.
Mhm.
Now, Jesus' words, this is the greatest, one of the greatest commandments. They formulated two, Christianity.
Yeah.
But then if this is the words of the person they call Lord and Master, then why aren't they going back to Moses' writings and confirming what is it that Jesus is teaching them, and should we really be following this or not?
Yes, because the so-called Lord and Master is adhering to the principles of the Torah.
Right.
He's living it and he's teaching and he's saying this is the greatest commandment. So if you follow me and you believe in what I'm saying, then you have to do what I say, because I'm doing what Yahweh says I should do. So you can do something different. That's why Yahweh says to the prophet Hosea, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Well, okay, knowledge. Where do you get knowledge from? Well, you get knowledge from being taught by the rabbi, the Kohen. And if you don't know, you have to know where the source of knowledge is to acquire knowledge.
Of course. But I think one part of the problem here as well, we have to also take it back to Paul as well.
Yes, oh yes.
And I think that's a major issue what's going on with the church as well.
So are
They're
you
following other doctrines.
Are you saying that the church is not following Yeshua's words so much, that they're following Paul's words more?
Yes.
That's exactly what I'm
Is
saying.
that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, yes.
Because if you think about it, with Paul's doctrines, and you can actually live a good life or a righteous life in Paul's eyes without keeping the
Without
commandments.
keeping the commandments.
Are you with me?
Yes.
And I think a lot of people, Christians, have opted for that
That's right.
instead of going the
Right, you're talking
wrong-
about the controversial book of Galatians, the
That's
letter
what
of
I'm talking
Galatians, where it talks about the circumcision, not uncircumcision, law or not law.
Exactly. If you're unclean, what is
Right.
the profit of man?
And I've asked some Christians, I said,
But who is your master? I mean, if I have taken upon myself and I have said that Rabbi Yeshua is my master,
Yep.
is my Rabbi, is my Lord, and my Savior, if I say that, and then I don't follow what he says,
Yeah.
surely there's a contradiction over here of
Yes.
terms.
Of course.
yes. So that's why I asked someone the question, as you have said, Rabbi Yeshua,
Lord with the
yes,
lowercase l, by the way.
Lord and Master,
Right.
living according to the Torah,
Yeah.
if you accept him in that, then how come you rather go according to the teachings of Paul? Who is greater, Rabbi Yeshua or Paul?
Well, here's $1 million question. Did Paul ever meet Yeshua physically?
No.
Not that I'm aware of.
We-
no.
we-
There were
we-
different times.
We know that they were in different times.
Yeah.
That's
We
right.
know that they never met in person.
Apart from his so-called vision of him when he was
Allegedly
not
as a vision, but there was no physical handshake.
Yes.
He never said, "How do you do, Rabbi Yeshua?" I'm Paul. I'm Shaul, Pharisee,
Yeah.
etc., etc.
Mhm.
So that never happened. But everything else is basically cloaked in a vision, and so on and so forth. But so Paul's teachings. So then I guess another question arises from that: should Paul's teachings be overriding Yeshua's teachings?
No. Rabbi, could I say something?
Yeah.
Torah teaches that in the mouth of two witnesses the truth is established.
Right.
Paul does not have two witnesses that confirms his meeting or vision of Yeshua.
Right.
There must be someone, a Kohen or a responsible person in the Torah who can vouch that Paul too, apart
Okay,
from
I mean,
Paul, did that.
let's just say two general people, anybody,
Yes, yes.
anybody of Israel, two people. So but that's another subject altogether. I mean, we're not discussing whether the vision of Paul is true or not true.
Mhm.
All we are establishing here is the words of Jesus, Yeshua,
Yes.
are they being adhered to by Christianity in general?
Mhm.
And from the answers that both of you have given me so far, and what I have seen myself in England and around other countries like North America
Yeah.
and other places, is that that's absolutely not the case.
That's right.
Even Pakistan, I went over there.
Mhm.
Yet they do have some semblance, by the way, in Pakistan. Pakistani Christians have some semblance of Torah and laws of Torah,
Okay.
but they do not fully adhere to the words of Yeshua either.
Right.
Okay.
So although I've seen their adherence a little bit better than here,
Yes.
but again, it's not fully there, because I think the lack, as you have both mentioned earlier, is because nobody ever reads the first 5 books.
Yeah.
They're like put away. They're not even in the Christian Bible.
Yeah.
A Christian Bible is what? New Testament.
Yeah.
Stripped of the
Of
Tanakh,
the Tanakh.
the Hebrew Bible, the Jewish Bible.
Mhm.
So the Jewish Bible is stripped from it,
Mhm.
therefore there is no Jewish Bible there. Where is my Tanakh? Oh,
Exactly.
it's not there, it's just the New Testament. Okay,
It's like
that's
having,
it.
it's like having a body without a spine.
Well, it's like a Muslim having a Quran and not having the rest and doesn't know what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much similar to that. So my point is this, that because you haven't got the rest of the body of the text, you are coming to conclusions based on what maybe Paul said, maybe somebody else, Peter said, maybe what John said. But what Yeshua said, where was he picking up that information from?
Mhm.
Did Yeshua have a rabbi, by the way? What do you think? Do you think Yeshua have a rabbi as a teacher?
I would have thought he must have had a rabbi,
Right.
because he was gonna. Obviously, he has to be taught by somebody in order
Right.
to know Torah. Like everybody.
So
has
custom
to
and
be-
tradition,
Yeah.
according to Jewish custom and tradition,
Mhm.
they would go to a synagogue. Right?
Yeah.
Just as Christians go to a church
Yeah.
on Sunday school,
Yeah.
they would go to a synagogue and they will learn. So
Exactly.
Yeshua would definitely have a rabbi,
Yes.
no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And most likely a Kohen.
Yeah, most likely a Kohen, and because he lived in the sphere of the Kohanim. The
Yes.
Kohanim were living in the north, and that's where he lived.
Yes.
So therefore, he would have associations with people like that. So therefore, he would have a teacher.
Mhm.
Now, of course, that thing is not highlighted. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be highlighted. But what needs to be highlighted is the Torah that he knew, the laws of Moses that he knew, that he predicated his life on.
Mhm.
He determined his life on those laws,
That's right.
and he taught them to his disciples. Because rabbis make disciples.
Yes.
He made disciples.
That's right.
Many people followed him,
Mhm.
and to this day they do.
Yeah.
But where are all the laws that they're supposed to be adhering to? And yet we're just looking at one law where we found that majority of Christianity is not adhering to that one law. And Yeshua himself said in the book of Matthew chapter 5 verse 17, he even goes so far as to say that he did not come to destroy or abolish the law.
That's right.
So if Christians have abolished the law, by whose authority?
Mhm.
Whose authority? Because it definitely wasn't by the authority of Yeshua, Jesus. He didn't say, by my authority,
Yeah.
I give you the right to abolish the law.
That's right.
So if he didn't do that in verse 17, think not that I've come to destroy the Torah or the prophets. I have not come to destroy it, but to reveal its full intended meaning.
That's
Which
right.
is, translated variously in other Bibles in different ways, trying to obscure the meaning of the text.
Mhm.
But so Yeshua said, I have come to reveal its full and intended meaning.
Yeah,
He has not come to destroy it
that's right.
That's right.
or do away with it. But what we are finding instead is, then why aren't Christians paying attention to Yeshua's words?
Because somebody's taken that importance out of them, of Christianity. They've taken it away from Christianity, the importance of it.
Right.
And I think whatever they've been given, it's been given over a certain amount of hundreds of years and thousands of years now, that they've just actually, it's become their life, and this is Christianity to them.
Right.
Rather than them having to go back and do
So
the
let me
research.
let me read the next two verses,
Okay.
which I think are important. For verily, Matthew chapter 5:17, 5:18.
Yes.
For verily I say to you, until Shamaim, heavens, and the earth pass away, one yud or nekudah shall in no way pass from the Torah, until all of it has been correctly filled up. Whoever therefore shall break one of the least of these commandments, and shall teach men to do so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of Shamaim, heavens. But
Yes.
whoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of Shamaim. So, my question then is this, that according to Rabbi Yeshua's words, anybody who teaches that not to do them will be called least.
That's right.
And anybody who teaches even small principles will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So then, that begs the question, if Jesus is saying here that you should be teaching the commandments,
That's right.
Yeah,
isn't that what he's saying?
that's what he's saying, exactly.
Then begs the question, why are you listening to other theologians, pastors, deacons, bishops, what not, You pick up a brick and there's a pastor there or a bishop, but
Yes.
why aren't people just going to the book and reading that book? What it's telling them is that they should be looking at.
Well, I think it's like this. It's the responsibility of a good teacher to direct his or her students. And if a good teacher like you teach us, you direct us what to do.
Right.
So it's practice. You go, you read, you study, and you live it. But if your teacher is not teaching you the correct principles, lazy mind will not direct you to study
So let me
and to search.
so-
Good.
No, it wouldn't. But let me ask a $1 million question here.
Mm.
This is a very important question. If I do not adhere to the person I call as my master, for argument's sake, my rabbi, I don't adhere to him, and I'm doing everything under the sun that is wrong, that is taught by men, clergy of different types.
Yes.
What will my judgment be with God at the end of my life? How will God see me? Who will God punish? Would He punish me directly because I've been disobedient? Or would He punish my so-called clergy?
It's going to punish you, because at the end of the day,
Who is,
you're
who is responsible?
I think you are responsible, the individual as well as the teacher,
Right, okay, so...
because the transgression is upon
yeah,
the
the teacher
individual.
will be also punished as well.
Yeah.
But you need to know for yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're not even being diligent enough to do the research
Right.
and to look where the 5 books are, where Yeshua told you to look, and to follow, then it's down to you as well. You're going to obviously.
So, Rabbi
come under
Jeremiah,
fire
so
as
what
well.
you're saying is that, and both of you, what you're both saying is that the responsibility falls both on the teacher and the individual.
Yes.
Indeed.
And
Yeah.
both will be under scrutiny by God for being mistaught, the student being mistaught and the teacher misteaching. But the greater, from what I would put over there, the greater burden there, of course, it falls on the teacher,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But of course, the lesser burden is also on the individual receiving that teaching, because he was so lazy,
Yes.
he didn't want to get off his chair and just even pick up his own book and read what it says. He didn't want to do that. Bible on the shelf collecting dust kind of
Yes,
thing.
that's
So,
right.
Well, if I could say something, earlier on you mentioned that God didn't actually tell you that you are a Levite,
right.
but certain aspects of your life, when He says you do not go to the graves, that made you think, and then you started to do your research and you got the answer yourself.
Right.
But God does that. He gives you an inclination, it's for you to follow. Now, every one of us has within us conscience, and I know the conscience speaks within every one of us.
Yes, absolutely.
When I wanted to know the truth about things, I was speaking to myself, and I could hear the voice within me. And if I didn't adhere to the voice, I probably would never come to the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
So by listening to the voice within you, you are directed. So the numerous people who don't listen or adhere to the voice within, I think that will be their judgment.
Right. So basically, from what I can gather, I mean, what we established so far is that Yeshua doesn't say anything that is out of line with Moses here.
No, he doesn't.
But what we find is that the large majority of followers or disciples of Yeshua, Rabbi Jesus, they are not adhering to the voice, what Yeshua gave the voice, to them to do this. They don't adhere to it. So would it be fair then to say that they'll be running like headless chickens, never arriving at the right conclusion?
Yes.
Very fair to say that. Very fair to say that. Unfortunately,
yeah.
But let us go to the next step.
Yes.
Because they also have, if you remember, there is a chapter 23 is very interesting. There is a commandment, or at least
Matthew, yes.
Matthew chapter 23, yes. And Yeshua says a few words that Christians take to heart, but they never again follow through the actual letter of the law, or even the Christian law. I'm looking at it from a New Testament perspective as well. So here it says, for instance, I wanted to read, maybe the King James Version will be helpful in this, because my translations are a bit different.
Okay, let me look for the King James
It says that in verse 7, 23:7, and I'll read my translation. And greetings in the markets, and to be called of men, my great one, or in your mind it say Rabbi. And it says, but be not called my great one or Rabbi, for one is your Adon, Master, Lord, and all of you are brothers. And called no man your Av, your father, upon the earth, for one is your Av, which is in the Shemaim. Neither be you called masters, for one is your master, Adon, Lord. And then it says in English, Messiah. But he that is greatest among you shall be your servant. So according to Christianity's understanding of this verse, they're saying, don't call any man a rabbi. Right? Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
According to Christianity's understanding. And that understanding is so skewed, but we'll look at that skew in a second, is that if no man is called rabbi, then why is Jesus called rabbi numerous times?
Yeah.
In the New Testament, which they deliberately confuse people by saying master, or Lord.
Yeah.
Most of those times those words are translated as rabbi.
That's right. But I had a student recently who said that she couldn't call me a rabbi anymore because that pertains to Yahushua,
Right.
which means master.
Right.
So that's her perception of the
Right.
word rabbi. So
In other words, the Christianity's theology, present theology, or the past theology of the church fathers, which were anti-Semitic in nature, hated Israel, period, and many Christians do today, who follow their theology, they're actually going away from when he's saying, don't call yourself master, don't call yourself a rabbi. Is he really talking about rabbi, or is he talking about something else? What do you think? Is he saying many people don't call somebody a rabbi when he himself is being called a rabbi, right?
Yeah.
I'm being called a rabbi, and I'm telling everybody don't call yourself a rabbi.
Yeah.
Isn't that contradicting the
It is
principle?
Yeah.
What a rabbi? What is a rabbi in English?
A rabbi is a teacher
Teacher.
of the principles of the Torah.
Right. Okay. So
So
there's
the
nothing
Hebrew
wrong.
word for teacher.
Intrinsically, nothing wrong with that.
No.
Yeah,
No,
it's a
that's
word for a teacher.
That's what he was doing. He was teaching Torah.
So if I go to school and I call my teacher sir, I'm not supposed to call him sir. I'm supposed to call him Mr. Tim or Mrs. Jones, but I'm not supposed to call him sir because somehow that's an insult. Actually, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
I should be calling her Miss, madam or sir or mom.
It's endearing. It's an endearing
Right.
term, isn't it?
In America, we call most people, most ladies that we meet, we call them ma'am.
Ma'am, yes.
And we call most men we meet sir. It's as a matter of respect. So are you telling me that this is teaching disruption in society? Don't call your teacher rabbi or sir, but call him by his name. That's just not correct.
That's not
In other words, the teaching has been totally misrepresented. Why do I say that? Because if we go back to this passage in verse 2, look what it says. We'll read verse 1 as well. Then Yahushua spoke to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, the experts of the Torah and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore, whatever, in some translations, in the present translation as he, all that he tells you to guard, that guard and work, but do not imitate their deeds, for they say one thing and do another. On this one it says they. So the Shem Tov translation, Hebrew one, which we took our translation from, has the word he in it.
Right.
But most of the majority English translations have the word they. So when it says he, some of the people attest some of the Jews attest that the he, the ones who try to decipher the New Testament, they say that the he is Moses. Whilst I would say that the he not only is Moses, but there is all the rabbis together. So he says, listen to them. He says, do what they tell you because they're reading from the Torah.
Yes.
5 books. He says, do what they read to you, but don't imitate their behavior because they were probably not keeping Torah correctly. Right?
Yes.
So if he's telling them, listen to these rabbis, he didn't say, don't call him a rabbi because, he's reading the correct words but not doing them.
Yeah.
Doesn't say that. In other words, it shows you that the New Testament at some point in history was tempered with the wording, translation tempered, if that's the right word to use.
Yes.
Or maybe just say it was badly translated.
To
It was
certain
badly
particular
translated to something that wasn't meant to be.
Yes.
To confuse and distort the meaning of the words.
Yeah.
So the word migrate or rabbi or Rebbe basically from the word Rav. Rav means great, right? And we use the word great for the Lord, Yahweh Himself, the God of Israel.
Yeah.
So when we say Rabbi, we could also be talking about God as the great one.
Yeah.
So what
Or the
Yeshua,
great teacher.
yeah, or the teacher. But here we are saying that Yeshua's reference wasn't to a rabbi, a teacher.
No.
It was to him, God directly, the great one. Here when he's saying the great one, this is why this is translated to the great one.
Okay.
He's not talking about a rabbi. He's talking about Yahweh Himself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't put yourself in the place of Yahweh. Why? Because what if you introduce new decrees, new commandments, overriding the previous ones? Then you have put yourself in the seat of the Lord God of Israel.
That's
Correct?
That's
Yes.
right.
This is this is the crux of the situation here that we're dealing with. We're dealing with a situation where Yeshua is saying, don't put yourself in God's seat. But many today in this world, in and out of churches, have put themselves in God's seat. Not talking about Christians,
Right.
but talking about their clergy, their so-called, their so-called church fathers, have put themselves in a position of God and saying, this is what you're supposed to do now.
Yes.
The very command that Torah commands us, do not add to the word.
Yeah.
Do not add to commandments. Do not take away commandments. So, unfortunately, I wouldn't say, would you say the Christians are guilty of that?
No, not really. I mean, I think that many of them are genuine believers or genuine. They want to know
Seekers,
the truth.
right.
Yeah, they're seeking the
They're
truth.
seeking, but so they're not directly guilty of changing the command, but somebody else in their place has done that.
Definitely.
That's right.
Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I would agree. And it's continually promoted, so they just
Right.
accept it.
Right.
That's what they are told.
Because even here, which I find very interesting, it says that it talks about in verse 3, all therefore whatever they tell you to guard, that guard and work. In other words, what are they telling? What they're reading to you from Moses,
Yes.
obey those.
Okay.
But what did Moses tell you? The Lord our God is
He's
one,
one.
right? We just spoke about that
Shema,
earlier.
yeah.
Shema Israel.
Shema Israel.
He is one. Yahweh Elohim is one. And then what else did Moses say? Didn't
Keep your commandments and teach them diligently to your
Right.
children.
Didn't he say keep the Sabbath?
Yes.
Didn't he say to
Commandment.
obey the parents?
Yes.
And many other commands thereof?
Yes.
Right?
Honor thy father and thy mother.
Right. There's 613 laws that are tested. And so when we go, I think the other thing that was interesting here, it says, verse 13, but woe to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut up the kingdom of Shemaim against men. For you neither go in yourselves, neither you permit those that are entering to go in. Woe to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you devour widows' batim, houses, and for pretense make long petitions. Therefore you shall receive the greater judgment. So I think the question we earlier discussed of teachers,
Yes.
here's the answer to that.
Yeah, because they are.
They will receive the
dealing-
greater judgment
Yeah.
because they are misteaching people. Here, if today these pastors and these bishops and other people are teaching wrong things that are not of God from the Hebrew Bible, then they will bear the greater judgment. Others will also, but of course, they'll bear the greater judgment.
Because something within the innermost being will be directed as to what they should do, what they shouldn't do.
Right.
When I was in Christianity, the pastor says to me that they would like me to study to become a pastor.
Right.
For the period of time that I had been reading the Bible and doing various works in the church. And then I asked myself a question, and I think that's always perhaps how God speaks to me.
Right.
I said, what do I know about the truth? The words come, Hilton, what do you know about the truth?
Right.
And I said, if I'm to stand before God's people and teach them, I'm going to be judged for what I teach. And I was talking to myself.
Right.
So then I started to do some research, and I realized, I'm not taking that position until I really know what is the truth of what I'm going to do. So if my innermost being was talking to me, why are they not listening to their inner selves?
Well, let me point out another very controversial topic that's within this, within the New Testament. Verse 23, woe to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. Well, these scribes and Pharisees, by the way, are the rabbis at the time.
Yes.
It says, for you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the Torah, judgment, loving kindness, and trustworthiness. Those you should have done, and not to leave the others undone.
Yes.
So Yeshua is commanding Christians, in quotation marks,
Yes.
to pay the tithes.
Yes.
Do Christians pay tithes today?
They'll
To the Levitical priesthood, which they don't even acknowledge.
No, they do pay tithes.
They
some
tell
of
you they
them.
pay tithes.
Yeah, but
Right.
they
But
don't,
to
not to
their
the
pastors and to their churches,
Are the
Yeah.
tithes supposed to be paid to the pastors? And
no.
No.
It's a commandment forever. It is to be paid to the Levites.
That's
so
right.
the question is, if they don't know, then who is a Levite?
But you probably only find that though in the
Are the
Torah.
pastors Levites then if they pay
No.
to the
No,
Levites?
they're not Levites.
They're not.
So therefore, they may be giving a love offering of sort,
Mm.
a love offering, but not generally a tithe.
Right.
Because what Jesus' words are here dictating, that you are to not to do this, you are to do this. He says, do not leave this undone.
That's
Yes.
right.
But if Christians are not even told to tithe, well, the Levitical priesthood, they don't even talk about who they are, because they're non-existent for them.
Yes, that's
You know,
right.
I don't exist technically for them. So my point is if I don't exist, and yes, many of us exist and are living across the world, then that means that God's commandments, Yahweh's laws are deliberately being distorted, where good people in churches are being deceived
Yes,
That's right.
by badly, interpreted teachings.
that's right.
And when you say a tithe, you're talking about 10% of somebody's regular wage, aren't you?
Right.
Right.
Yes.
This is what they should
That's
be
right.
paying to the
That's right.
Levites.
If they are working, that is.
That's right.
Not unemployed and
That's right.
Social Security.
Yeah. But that's obviously, I mean, what if that preacher was actually teaching Torah though? What if he was teaching the commandments? I mean,
If a preacher was teaching the commandments, then like I said, there's a difference between a tarumah, a love offering, and a tithe.
right.
A love offering can go to a person.
Mm.
Any person can receive who teaches you Torah, but not a tithe.
Right.
Tithe is only ever dictated to the Levites in the gate. In the gate,
In the gate.
not Levites. Levites basically. God says a Levite in your gate. Any Levite that teaches you is in your gate. In other words, you have access to him.
Right.
Or
Okay.
It's
So
always going to be him, not a
within
her.
the country, same country, or where you can.
It doesn't
go on
matter
the
which
phone.
country he lives in.
Anywhere.
You can get to that Levite. He's in your gate.
Okay.
He's in your political sphere.
Right.
So you have to give your. That means God will multiply you and your substance if you do that. If you don't, you can forget about multiplication. I think it'll be division instead.
Yeah, subtraction. Yeah.
So, but that's a controversial thing. I mean,
Yeah.
nobody wants to hear about this.
No.
Let's talk about other things, but not
Yeah.
this, right?
But
Exactly.
Rabbi, if you think about it, many of the churches, they keep emphasizing Malachi 3.
Yeah.
And it's like they're admonishing the church to pay their tithes. They read it here in Malachi. So this is where they go back to the Old Testament when it suits them, because there's money to be made here.
That just brought me to another issue, which is another very controversial issue, and I think maybe
And the paying of tithes.
No, not the tithes, but
Okay.
it is to do with a different issue. But I thought it would be relevant to discuss it because what we call badly interpreted text.
Yes.
Under the context of badly interpreted text, we have texts in the Bible which has been very, very badly interpreted by and large the people out there, and then it's misapplied, and then people are unfortunately, for a better word, deceived or led into believing something that's not true. See if I can find that, because I think that would be kind of responsible, because people don't like to look at you were mentioning the tithe verse from
Malachi chapter
Malachi
3 from
chapter
verse
3.
8.
Okay, so I'm going to take you to Malachi chapter 2. Why don't we read chapter 2 as well?
Yes,
Right?
okay.
Let's start reading from verse 4. And you shall know that I have sent this commandment to you, that my covenant will continue with Levi, says Yahweh of armies. My covenant will continue with him for life and shalom, and I gave them to him for the fear wherewith he feared me, and was afraid before my name. Torahs of truth will continue in his mouth, and iniquity was not found in his lips. He walks with me in shalom and equity, and did turn away many from idolatry. For the Kohen, priest's lips should guard knowledge, and they should seek the Torah from his mouth, for he is the teacher from Yahweh of armies.
So yeah, that is there.
Right? So Yahweh of armies, the Lord God of Israel, is saying that you
Yes.
should go to the Kohen to seek you.
Yes.
Because
And
he is
it-
my teacher.
And it's forever.
Yeah,
It
it's
says
forever,
that.
it's forever, right?
Yeah.
So now let's go to the second controversy over here. The second controversy, if you remember, is that we have here. Let's go to the second bit, which I think Christians will. A lot of Christians use it, but then they don't understand it either. Okay, so it talks about, chapter 3 talks about, behold, I will send my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me, and the master whom you seek shall suddenly come to his temple, even the Malach of the covenant whom you delight in. Behold, he shall come, says Yahweh of armies. So it talks about the messenger, which Christians misapply to Yeshua,
Yes.
which it doesn't apply to him. And then it goes on, and it says, will a man rob Elohim? Talking
Yes.
about the tithes.
Yes.
Yet you have robbed me, but you say, wherein have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. So Christians who don't understand and don't give to the right place, they technically are robbing God.
Yes.
So God will get it out in another way. It says, you have cursed me with a curse, and you have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring you all the tithes into the storehouse. They love quoting this verse, and they forget
Yes.
the whole context,
Yes,
who
right.
it applies to. Bring you all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house, and prove me now herewith, says Yahweh of armies, says Lord in the Christian Bibles, if I not open you the windows of Shemaim, and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your wine cast her fruit before the time in the field, says Yahweh of armies. So what do you have to say about this one?
Is that for Israel? Is that for?
Well, it is for Israel,
For
but
future?
Christians are applying it to themselves, so let's look at it from their
Yeah,
application.
a lot of the priests or the pastors, they appropriate that to themselves,
To the
to
church.
to the congregation,
church, isn't it?
Yeah.
so they
Yeah.
can
Right.
get them to pay the
Yeah.
tithes to the
Right.
church.
Right, okay. So what we are saying is that it's misappropriated again. Okay, I'm not saying that Christians are not part of Israel. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, yes, you want to be part of Israel, you're grafted in, fine. Because Abraham was told that I will graft Gentile nations into you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Abraham was told that in the Torah, so I believe that is true.
Yeah.
There's no problem Christians being grafted in, but then do the rest as well.
Yeah. Keep the rest of the commandments.
Right.
Yeah.
But then I'm going to bring you to another controversy now, real controversial, about divorce. Christians use this to say you can't divorce because God hates divorce. Right?
Yes.
I'm going to read this from Malachi chapter 2,
Mhm.
and it says here, verse 16, for Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, says that he hates putting away, for one covers violence with his garment, says Yahweh of armies. Therefore take heed to your ruach, that you deal not treacherously. Do you want to read your English version from the maybe KJV or something? Then it says, you have wearied Yahweh with your words, yet you say, wherein have we wearied him? When you say, everyone that does evil is good in the sight of Yahweh, and he delights in them, or where is the Elohim of judgment? So, what is the context of this verse? If we take this word by word, and a lot of Christians have problem with remarriage
Yeah.
and divorce,
Yeah.
both.
Yeah.
They say that we can't divorce unless there's adultery present, in a wife. They take the words of Jesus, and they use
Yeah,
those literally.
Yeah.
And I think those words we can probably in the New Testament, you'll find the words of Jesus in various places regards divorce.
Yeah.
I believe that the first one will be under the. I have to pull up the. Let's see. Ancient times, okay. where if we remember that Yeshua spoke about divorce, he spoke about other things, but again I find that a lot of the times is misinterpreted and misapplied.
Because they were divorcing for silly reasons. I think that's what the point was, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Right.
they were just divorcing for really silly reasons, and he was saying to them, "Don't divorce for those reasons."
Right. And so let's go forward. You want to read that Malachi chapter 2 verse from the KJV maybe, or New King James is fine as well. That kind of gives us some context in there.
Reading from verse...
we are in verse 16. Malachi 2:16. Then I'll follow through with this.
For the Lord God of Israel saith he, hateth putting away, for one coveteth violence with his garment, saith the Lord of hosts. Therefore take heed to your spirit, that you deal not treacherously. Ye have wearied the Lord with your words. You say, wherein have we wearied him? When ye say, everyone that doth evil is good in the sight of the Lord, and he delighteth in them, or where is the God of judgment?
Mm-hmm. So what would you then say? Because Christianity has taken those words to mean that God hates divorce. Therefore, even if you live with a husband who insults you, who beats you up, who makes you black and blue, which is today called abuse, in the homes, that you're supposed to stay with him. So would that be an accurate understanding of the words of both Yahweh and of course later Jesus, who said a verse to the effect of that you're allowed to divorce for adultery cases, etc.
Yeah. I think unfortunately the Christians take it literally, don't they?
So I will read from Matthew chapter 19, and verse 3. The Pharisees also came to him, testing him, saying to him, is it lawful according to Torah for a man to give a certificate of get? That's basically paper to divorce your Torah wife to his wife for any cause, emphasis. And he answered and said to them, have you not read that which he made them at the beginning, made them from male and female, and said, for this cause shall a man leave Av, father, and Im, mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall be one flesh. Therefore they are no more two, but echad, one flesh. What therefore therefore God has joined together, let no man put asunder. They said to him, why did Moses then command to give a certificate of get or divorce, and to put her away? He said to them, Moshe, because of the hardness of your hearts, allowed you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. So my point is this, that it almost makes it sound like that divorce is not permitted. And then the juxtapose that with verses, of Malachi 2:16, you juxtapose that, it almost like makes it concrete. Would you agree or would you disagree on these two remarks?
I would agree.
Okay, so let's say that a man is has a spouse or wife, and he is unjust to her, and maybe he abuses her, maybe he beats her, or maybe he does other things. So then, is that spouse supposed to stay suffering in silence?
No, she has to go to the Kohen and speak to him.
Well, then surely the your phrase and earlier that you think that's correct, then that's probably not correct then.
Yes, yeah, that's not
so
correct.
you have to readjust. And what do you think?
Yeah, I mean there has to be room for a divorce. I mean, like you said, if a woman's going to be beaten by her husband, there has to be grounds.
Because then we can't just say, because what did Yeshua say? Because of the hardness of your hearts, right?
Yes.
So what did Moses allow? Well, for that we have to go to Deuteronomy 24. Do you want to read Deuteronomy 24?
Deuteronomy 24.
Deuteronomy 24, I believe, has the necessary verses that Yeshua here is referring to the Torah. And I'm going to have to open the Torah, but then I'll come back to the other parts so we can be in sync together. So Deuteronomy 24 verse 1, you can read it on your King James, I will refrain. Verse 1 to 4.
If a man marries a woman who becomes displeasing to him because he finds something in some incident about her,
Right.
and he writes her a
Something
certificate
indecent.
indecent
Right.
about her.
Uncleanness, okay.
Yes, and he writes her a certificate of divorce.
And he
Gives
consent,
it,
he consent to basically.
Yeah.
So let's just stop there.
yes,
So the word they mentions indecent in the Hebrew is a word meaning to something of uncleanness, like a sexual nature, like maybe in adultery
Adultery or
or something else, right?
yes.
We won't go into that so much because it will take us much into divorce and causes.
Yes.
So let's just say that Moses said, if your wife is adulterous, yes, but we also find that an unjust husband is also permitted to do, and you're allowed to divorce from an unjust husband.
Yes.
Not just one who beats you up. But what if a husband doesn't give you money in the house
Well,
and says that I'm not going to give you nothing?
That's
well,
unjust.
he doesn't feed you.
Doesn't feed you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's also cause, right?
Yeah.
But let me bring you something very, very interesting, because I think here is going to become enlightening. Have a drink of water. And I'll continue. So let me come back to these verses and maybe enlighten the audience what they actually are saying, not what they actually are hearing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they're hearing, in your Bibles they might say, for the Lord, for Yahweh the Elohim of Israel, the God of Israel says that he hates putting away, for one covers violence with his garment. Stop. Who hates? It's not Yahweh. The he is a lowercase h. It is for the person who hates putting his wife away. It was a husband. There were husbands in ancient times who didn't want to divorce their wives. And they would leave them and they would go to the second woman and marry her, because polygamy was allowed and is allowed in according to Torah law.
Yes.
Another controversial subject. But let's just say that he took the second wife. He didn't divorce the first. Maybe she was entirely unhappy with him. We don't know the circumstances. And he said, you know what, I don't care what you think, I don't care about your feelings or whatever, I'm going to go get a second wife, you're going to remain and I'm going to feed you, I'm not going to give you money, blah, 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 I'm going to take the second wife, I'm going to love her. So he did that. So who hates a divorce? Not Yahweh, the man.
Okay.
Because a man made the woman what we call in Jewish terminology a guna. She can't be now divorced.
Yeah.
Because if he doesn't divorce her, she can't force a get. She can't force a divorce. She can't go to the rabbis and say, you know what, this man is not giving me divorce, force him to divorce. Rabbis can't force you for a divorce. A man must, by his own induction, in his own feelings,
Yes.
has to give you a divorce if you want a divorce. He has to give you that divorce. So Yahweh hates. It doesn't say Yahweh hates the divorce. It says a man hates giving the divorce.
Yeah.
You can get a second wife.
Yeah.
What does he care?
Yeah. So he just
Yeah.
carries
Right?
on.
You got your second girlfriend, you're gone.
Yeah.
So she's
In
gonna
this
live a-
society, right? It's
Yeah.
like similar to
Yeah.
you have a wife, you get a girlfriend,
Yeah.
you don't care about the wife, you're living with your
Yeah.
girlfriend. Similar to that, I'm
Yes.
saying.
So
Gentile
she's
law.
going to live a really miserable life.
Right, because she's not divorced, she
left
can't
there
take
in the
another man for a
So
husband.
she's like a prisoner.
Yeah.
Right.
In a
So
sense.
that is the man hates the divorce, not the Lord God of Israel.
Okay.
He's already said it in Deuteronomy 24. You're allowed to divorce.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, uncleanness was one of the reasons. But within the uncleanness, many reasons can come under that.
Yes.
Doesn't have to be adultery only. Many other reasons, which we're not going to discuss. But what I wanted to show you is a misinterpretation and the level of ignorance that Christians have, the clergy, I mean.
Yes.
The clergy have so much ignorance and they're using that ignorance to suppress the people.
Yeah.
That means that a miserable woman, a miserable wife who's been subjugated maybe in some way or maybe been abused by her husband in some way has to live there, suffer in silence because Malachi 2:16 has been misinterpreted by Christianity in general.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's my point.
Yeah.
My point is, what does it say? It says that therefore take heed to your spirit, to your ruach, that you deal not treacherously. Who deal not treacherously? Not talking about Yahweh.
The man.
The man.
Yeah.
So the man is not giving the divorce when he should be giving the divorce.
Yeah.
That's right. She let go. Yeah.
Because if she is being dealt with treacherously, well, clearly it doesn't apply to Yahweh. I mean, it's right there.
He doesn't.
in the next line of the
He
text.
does deal treacherously.
So we know that this applies to the man, and this is where the problem lies, and misinterpretations therefore have allowed Christianity to, bash people who wanted to take a divorce because their husbands or spouses or whatever, were not
Yes.
faithful or sincere. So therefore, Jesus' words, Yeshua's words, have to be correctly seen. It says, he said to them, because of the hardness of your hearts allowed you to put your wives from the beginning, it was not so. So he's basically giving the ideal. the ideal was that you should be with your wife forever.
Yeah.
Live together happily, acknowledge each other, love each other, etc.
Yes.
But he's saying that now we're not in the ideal because we're no longer in the garden. We're outside the garden now, by the way.
Yes.
Last I checked,
Right.
Adam and Eve were thrown out.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
if Adam and Eve were thrown out, we're no longer in perfect conditions. What Yeshua's mouthpiece, he's a Torah teacher.
Yes.
He's saying that, look, because of the hardness of your hearts. Well, it could be a number of things. Hardness of a man's heart could bring a number of things, number of issues.
Yeah.
It could be that he doesn't want to keep Torah any longer. It could be he doesn't care about the wife and the children any longer. It could be anything.
Yes.
So he says that this is permitted. In other words, permitted to who? Both parties.
Right.
Not just the man, but the woman also. Because a woman can bring an allegation to a husband and say, this man doesn't feed me or the children. I have to go work. If I don't work, my children will starve to death. Right? So it's both ways. It's not one-sided talk over here. So this is very important. And then it says, the disciples say to him, if the case of the man be so with his wife, it is not good to marry. In other words, the disciples are complaining that if we have to be, so rigorous with our wives, then maybe we shouldn't marry at all.
Yeah.
But the commandment was given by the Lord God of Israel, Yahweh,
Yes.
that a man shall not be alone.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's,
You have to keep striving to
Yeah.
find the perfect.
Yeah.
right.
And
Yeah.
to do, and to iron
But
out, iron out the differences.
It may not be the perfect wife.
No.
Let's admit
Yeah,
it.
it might
There may
be.
be imperfections in both parties,
Yeah.
There's probably-
male and female.
Yeah.
So I think what it is working under the circumstances
There you have.
the best way possible.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where both you and your spouse can work out between yourselves. If it doesn't work out, it's to the courts we go.
That's
or
right.
quickdivorce.com.
That's right. But you both have the option of divorce,
So-
though. That's
Yes.
what it's
Right,
saying
right.
as well.
So-
So the woman can divorce the husband if the
That's
situations, have got.
That's
so
correct.
bad.
And
Yeah.
what is interesting is that look what Yeshua said to the Pharisees. These are supposed to be experts of the law, right? They came testing him in Matthew chapter 19 verse 3, and he says they are asking, is it lawful according to Torah for a man to give a certificate of divorce? And and he's answering and said, have you not read? What does that teach us? What we spoke about earlier. Shouldn't Christians read the
Yes,
Torah,
yes,
the first 5
yes.
books?
Have you not read?
Have you not
And
read?
they are rabbis asking him that question.
I think that just takes the cake. Have you not read?
Yeah. I close the case there.
Yeah, he closes the case,
Yeah.
And then he says that, and here's another interesting bit. Women ask, right, who should we go with? Who's a good husband? When single women want to marry,
Yeah.
and they say, well, what kind of husband should I find? If he's law-abiding, if he's, God-fearing, what kind of husband? And the answer is right here in the New Testament, actually. It's throughout the pages of the Hebrew Bible, but I found it kind of interesting. It says here, verse 5 is in the Torah as well, by the way.
Yeah.
Before this, it says, and said, for this cause shall a man leave his Av, father, and Im, mother,
Yes.
and shall cleave to his wife, and two shall be one flesh. Right?
Yes.
Let's stop there. What does that actually mean? That if a man is living with mommy and daddy,
Yeah.
you can't cleave to him.
No.
That's right.
Do you see that? Do you see what the
Yeah,
Torah is
yeah,
telling
yeah,
us?
yeah, yeah.
What Yeshua is telling us, if you're going to find a husband, and the husband's living with mommy and daddy at maybe 40 or something,
Yes.
then be careful, that may not make a good husband.
Yeah.
How is he going to cleave to his wife while he's cleaving to his parents?
That's right. That's
Yes.
right. And that's what we've
Same
done.
with a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is your answer, that you should be totally
One.
cleave to
Separate.
one to the away from parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
You should not be with your parents. In other words, it's not saying to disrespect parents.
No.
It's saying yes, you respect your parents.
Yeah.
But it's saying that if you're in a house with the mother and father and maybe 6 brothers and sisters, then who are you cleaving to?
The family.
You already cleave to the family.
That's
How
right.
are you going to cleave to your wife?
That's right.
You're told in the Torah and here, you must leave mother and father,
That's right.
including your brothers and
And
sisters.
of course, there won't be any privacy as such as you would expect to have in your own birth.
Right.
Yeah, but
So-
a man must be a king in his own castle.
That's
Do you know what I
right.
mean? You can't have 2 kings, like
Right.
father and son,
Yeah.
in the same house.
There's
It's not
going to
going
be
to
a
work.
controversy. And your
So-
wife at the same time? No.
So I think that this brings us to a beautiful conclusion that when women ask the question, what kind of husband do I need? Well, look for a husband without mother and father attached to his hips,
Yeah. Yeah.
or him attached to their hips.
Or wife.
Yeah.
Or still with the parents.
Right,
Yeah.
that's very important. I think that is 100% clear to me. But I think also, the New Testament has some wonderful teachings in it that arise from the Hebrew Bible.
Yes.
But I am finding, maybe you might agree with me or not, that a lot of the Christians faithfully want to follow the New Testament, but they're not reading what's written.
Yes.
In other words, Yeshua is saying, have you not read?
Yeah.
Does that mean that Yeshua said, don't read Torah?
No.
So he is telling his experts in the Torah, have you not read what is written? It means that you should be reading what you call the Old Testament. You should be reading it,
Yes.
applying it in your lives,
Absolutely.
right? So if you're not applying it in your life, then that means there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
I'll kind of sum it up in that,
Yeah.
is that Yeshua's words today are not, they're not kept to what Yeshua has said.
No.
So Yeshua has said, do this, do this, do this. Christians have sincerely not followed Yeshua. They have sincerely followed the pastor, the bishop, the grandfather, the great grandfather, and what my dad said and what my mother said. They have not followed the person they call Master and Lord.
That's right.
I think that I think we have to agree together
Yeah.
that they should really go back
Yeah.
and restudy the words of their Master, their Lord, their Rabbi,
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps they will, get a better reward from the God of Israel for being obedient.
I think so.
Absolutely.
Torah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I think I'll sum it up with that. If you have anything else to say, Rabbi Jeremiah?
I would just say, I was about to say, basically also stop looking at Paul as the main source.
Paul is a
Yeah.
father of Christianity,
yeah. Yes.
right? Source of all the commandments.
That's what I was saying.
And Rabbi Yosef?
Well, I was just about to say something about that. They put Paul ahead of
Right.
ahead
So
of
don't
Jesus.
put the cart before the horse,
No.
basically.
And so, if a Christian really wants to keep the principles, and he or she finds his pastor or where they go to church is not adhering to that, then it's questionable. They have to make a decision.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, their salvation and the judgment of their salvation rests upon their understanding and what they believe and what they follow.
Right. So I'll finish this with this, that instead of running like headless chickens and trying to figure out what the heck I'm supposed to do, read your book, your New Testament, read it, and then the New Testament tells you to go read the writings, the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, what you call the Old Testament, read it. Try to apply it in your life. There are great increases, benefits, blessings in your life with that, but it's really entirely up to you whether you want the blessings or the curses. Entirely up to you. I encourage you to read the Hebrew Bible, in the English translation or translation of your choice in the languages you speak. And I leave it with that. Thank you for listening. You're with Rabbi Simon Altaf, a Kohen. You're with Rabbi Jeremiah, Rabbi Yosef. Have a great day ahead. Shalom, shalom to you.
Shalom, shalom.